goodness, pathetic.
The story of Richard Hambleton is as mysterious as his black shadow figures.
Richard's paintings, they're dark, they're beautiful, they're chaotic.
Richard was one of the most interesting, enthralling, ecstatic artists coming out of New York in the 80s.
He's looking so cute.
At that time, he was much more successful in Basquiat. Basically, he was the only artist that I couldn't buy.
The man's a genius. He really is.
He's such a crazy dreamer, visionary, that often it seems like madness.
I think there's a certain amount of passion which is involved in what I do.
He was an absolute wild man.
He was sexy, he was attractive.
He was not normal. Guy was weird.
He's screaming away.
This work isn't, it's conceptual. My brain is going to fall apart if I don't get it out.
He's so self-destructive, but he won't die.
How can somebody so dark and dingy be heroic? But somehow it is.
One of the big mysteries about Richard Hambleton is why he does some of the things he does.
In the midst of becoming the most important thing in New York with Basquiat, with Keith Haring, he leaves.
He removed himself from the scene, and when you remove yourself from the scene, you disappear, and when you disappear, you're invisible, and that's what happened to him.
Richard! You gonna open up? Richard, it's Andy. I'm out the front. Can you please answer the door?
You're right down.
What's going on up there?
I just woke up.
Oh, really?
I'm so tired, I just slept, yeah.
Have a good sleep?
Yeah.
Alright.
I built every little thing in this place. The fire department went through and they said, "You don't live here, do you? You don't sleep here." I was in almost every publication in the world. Life magazine, People magazine, Vogue magazine, I had like 5 pages. You know, this wasn't planned.
What everyone says to me when Richard Hambleton comes up, they're like, oh, he's still alive? Yeah, he's around. And they're like, we haven't heard it or seen him in 20 years. What made you hide for 20 years?
I wasn't hiding.
What were you doing?
I was painting. I was working. You know, I was barely surviving. An artist can't get it together without collectors and galleries.
What was it like not doing an art show for 25 years?
Well, it was frustrating.
It was frustrating, right?
Yeah, I wanted to show, but basically, I don't know why. I kept trying to get things together, you know. I kept being ripped off by people, and I was in the street, like living.
You were homeless, right?
Yeah, basically. There's a lot of artists that have patrons that don't show for 10 to 15 years, but they keep, keep work.
Oh, this is that seascape. Where are these paintings now?
That was in the show in Milan, and where it went from there, it was sold. Who knows? And that was quite some time ago.
And where did you grow up?
Vancouver.
His whole childhood is kind of a mystery. I know he started when he was very little. He drew and painted when he was just a kid. He was just doing it. Richard's a formally trained artist. He went to school. But he moved away from that real quickly. He's always on the fringe.
I created a murder scene. Which was experienced by the public as a murder. They'd wake up, walk outside and think, who died here?
I was lucky enough to get a grant in the city of Vancouver. So I did the serial murder down the West Coast. It was, you know, it was a mission.
Richard went from Canada to Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and then he worked his way across the United States to New York.
I was down in Tribeca one evening, and of course Tribeca at that time was nothing like it is now. In fact, parts of it were totally bombed out. There was nothing there but rubble. But I saw one of these cutouts there, and it had the red paint in it, and it looked like blood. And I was like, we gotta get out of here. This is a dangerous part of the city.
It was a murder mystery narrative.
What made you want to do them?
I wanted to paint realism.
With a 25% increase in murder, New York again led the nation in the number of murders last year. Violence has become epidemic. When people see that one person can do it, then they think they can too.
The whole thing was a psychological experiment. How can he affect society with his art? I think what Richard was trying to tell people is that there are no boundaries. No one's really protected. The moment you step outside, we're all possibly victims.
At that time, there wasn't any kind of concept of public art. I remember stumbling on one of them and thinking it was a real crime scene. And then at another time stumbling on another one, and I started to realize, well, maybe this is something else, but not really having any language for it.
It was kind of like beyond art. It was a performance, it was also street art, it was a drama. It came with a story attached to it. It's more than just aesthetics, it's more than just painting and surface. It was like a murder mystery story.
Image mass murder was a mass murder. It was done in 15 cities. Doing it in all those cities was part of the work, you know. The first thing I did usually was figure out, like, where the city hall was, where the public library was, and just get to know the city, and then go out and do it.
He doesn't want to reveal himself yet, so he develops this imaginary character. He becomes a private investigator, R. Dick Tracy, and he actually sets up an office on the East Coast when he gets here.
One of the names I was using, Mr. Ree, because that's what it became. It became a Mr. Ree.
I really began to think I was murdering people. You're going back to a hotel room covered in paint, blood, in blood red paint, and it was so, you know, getting a cheap hotel room, putting maps of the city on the wall, planning out where I was going to, you know, do it. And my friends laid their bodies down. I traced over my friends. Made the front page of the San Francisco News. Like, I made the news. That was part of the work. You know, I wanted to make the news. It was part of the murder mystery.
Playing with language.
Playing with the media. You know, it was part of the work.
It really caused a huge sensation in the art world and also amongst the police, because they thought that it was actually a murder.
They were wondering who was murdered, who was behind it, which got him in a lot of trouble.
I put up a wanted poster, too, a fake FBI poster related to this. And, you know, the public wanted to know who did it. I was told I'd never get a grant again.
The place to be if you wanted to become a rich and famous artist is New York. Just like any aspiring starlet had to go to Hollywood. It's all about being part of a scene, a club, going to all the openings, the art parties, schmoozing, networking, hanging out.
The first day I came to New York, I went to Club 57 because the director, Kai Eric, he introduced me to Jean-Michel Basquiat the first day I got here. And he was actually wearing a crown, just like in the movie.
He kind of came to New York with the strategies of a pretty serious conceptual artist. And like most of us, he became just enthralled by this god-awful mess that New York City was at that time. Pretty much immediately started a practice on the streets.
My first exposure to Richard's work was a piece called I Only Have Eyes for You, which was this life-size man, sort of in this Napoleonic stance, in funny, strange places. They would give me a start.
I Only Have Eyes for You was this other piece I did, which started in 1980. This photo image of someone standing around the city. You know, he's all dressed up, and he doesn't know where he's going. Like there's a lot of people out there just waiting. You know, maybe for you. I only have eyes for you.
He's like one of the first artists to actually take an image of himself, put it on the street like that.
It was done on blueprint paper, so it would slowly fade over the course of 3 to 6 months.
And as the weather grabs them, they just wash out and turn into a ghost silhouette.
This image it's a life-size photo. It was 1980. I knew it was a new decade, and I knew things were going to be different.
New York in the early 80s was a very different place than it is now.
You have to remember that Times Square then was raunchy. You know, there were prostitutes and drug dealers roaming the streets.
Now, simultaneously with that, in the East Village and Lower East Side was a totally different kind of scene.
Well, it was like one big nonstop party. The rents were really cheap. New York was still the place where you could realize your creative dream. So it was kind of a mecca.
The people that were there were primarily creative people. They were there to make a statement about society, about art.
And I think it was the bad things about the Lower East Side scene that made it good. It was a cauldron of all kind of fiery energies.
It was kind of lawless. The area was dangerous, but that was the trade-off.
They were willing to sacrifice to live in this area. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
The East Village movement was about kids having fun and kids wanting to express themselves. You had CBGB's, David Byrne and the Talking Heads, television, and the Ramones. I mean, it was amazing.
You know, the best part about New York during the 80s is the nightlife. And Richard felt more connected to the night. He's a night animal.
In summer of 1980, it was impossible to miss Richard's shadows. They were very scary, and they were festooned on these walls, sometimes where you would least expect them. The whole neighborhood had this kind of vibe of being very edgy, you know, and just like you didn't know where you were half the time. You would come up onto one of these dark alleys or something and light up a cigarette or a joint, and then all of a sudden you see this huge, humongous shadow thing. That was very, very spooky indeed.
This was a relatively unlit downtown, very unpopulated, and very dangerous. His art really captured the lurking, super visceral psychological effect. Those things scared the pants off of you.
You don't experience it as an image. You experience it as an action. And the first time that it happened to me, I was completely freaked out. I thought somebody was gonna jump me.
city as part of the picture. I don't paint the entire picture. I just simply add to the urban picture, and I try to be aware of the psychological and sociological implications that a city has, and the structure of the city, and just work with it and add to it. It's simply just adding to the picture.
For a long time, I wasn't aware of who have done these things, But the media kind of cultivated an image of this shadow man.
If anything, I'm the shadow behind the black figure, I've got New York covered. There's a security guard in every section of New York. And if they all came to life, then that could be part of a horror movie. Black figures wandering the streets.
People would walk all over the city looking for these mysterious marks springing up everywhere. They were like precursors to Banksy.
No one did anything like that. Now there's this guy named Banksy who's taken the world by storm.
Banksy has talked about how Richard Hambleton was an inspiration for his work. Banksy tries to get the audience to look at their surroundings in a different way. And you can see a direct connection to the way Richard Hambleton was doing that.
At that time, graffiti was dominant. If you were an artist, if you cared about art, the fumes of the aerosol got everyone intoxicated. Everyone tried to grasp at the energy and potential of the city as an urban canvas. These people would be now considered the pioneers of what we call street art.
Yeah, there's a big difference between what's thought of as being graffiti art and what I do. Just because it's in a public place, I don't think it should be compared to graffiti and street art.
Richard always had the air of visiting royalty. Yes, I'm painting on the street, but I'm painting on the street because of these grand ideas of art and how it should be accessed.
Richard has always had arrogance and pride. He always felt that he was like, a real establishment artist. Never with just a graffiti guy or anything like that.
He was different from everyone else. He was always kind of calm, cool, and collected, and a little bit reserved. I mean, he was already taking drugs, but he was in relative control of it.
Richard's a very likable guy. I mean, when you meet him, he's very well dressed, wore a great suit, looked great. He's like a rock star.
Something that always impressed me about him was he had the greatest sense of style in his clothes. To my sensibility, he should have been on the cover of GQ.
I remember seeing Richard at openings with dark sunglasses, flowing cravat, suits, and girls. Richard likes girls. Richard likes girls a lot.
He was kind of a little bit edgy, but he was sexy, he was attractive. He was definitely a presence.
Women in general find Richard fascinating. He's enticing. He has a natural energy around him that just kind of draws you in.
What was it that was making these girls go for him? And they really did. And even now, Meta would do whatever she could for him.
Meta Madsen was his girlfriend, and she was beautiful and charming and normal and together, which was a startling contrast to Richard Hambleton. Meta was his better half.
The romance, I think, was there from the onset, and the whole experience was sort of romantic. I mean, the city at night, riding bicycles, lying in the park.
One of our first dates, we went to Tompkins Square Park, and we painted squirrels on the trees.
Yeah.
She was a painter, so black squirrels on the trees. That was pretty good. Shadow squirrel.
An evening would often just start out going to a nightclub or maybe seeing music, and actually, he's a pretty good dancer. And it always ended up us walking around and getting some paint, as opposed to going out for dinner. You find yourself with a bucket of paint and dodging police. Richard was painting, and I was helping carry some paint, and these police cars came out of nowhere, and We're standing there covered with paint, buckets of paint, brushes, and Richard disappears. He takes off.
So they had the guns pointed at me, and they pulled me up by my hair.
No, it was
and
bad.
then one guy starts kicking me, and she screams, "Stop!" Thank goodness you screamed.
Oh, I was screaming and yelling.
He's my boyfriend.
It did not take long for us to evolve into a relationship, and then we saw each other all the time. I mean, every night for years. At that time, he was intrigued with branding and the Marlboro Man and his significance in the American landscape.
This is the Marlboro Man. What he is, he's an American hero. He's got the white hat, he's got the yellow trench coat like, firemen. But actually what he's doing is killing people. I mean, he's getting Marlboro with cigarettes. So I blackened him out.
Richard's doing them in this paint, which is like black tar. One of the associations I always brought was I like Marlboro, man. Is that what it's doing to my lungs?
And it's like paradise found, paradise lost, paradise exploited by Marlboro.
There was this whole mystique around the Marlboro Man for him. And that was really what drew him into the rodeo paintings.
When I got to New York, the three kingpins of the graffiti art world were Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring, and Richard Hambleton.
The International Herald Tribune did a one-page article on the boom in graffiti art in 1983, and Richard was the only artist in that article with an image of his art, not Basquiat, not Haring. And it says, the Basquiat, you got to pay up to $10,000. If you want a Haring or a Hambleton, you got to pay $15,000.
Richard and Keith Haring probably had the biggest influence in terms of using urban space to make a whole city your canvas.
I think that Basquiat and Richard and Haring are three of the best artists of their generation.
You drew this Shadowman.
Yeah.
In around the city, and Basquiat would come over and draw a skull on top.
Yeah, but I love it when we get an interaction with this.
The graffiti artists that are working on the street come inside and they start making paintings for the inside, and the galleries start selling them.
The East Village scene. So, there was a couple of places like Fun Gallery and Club 57, and that's where Keith Haring, Basquiat, and me, we would hang out. The initial 2 years, there was 6 openings every night. The storefront was a gallery, and it's just like a big party.
My name is Fab Five Freddy. This is Ramel Z. We are generals in the Urban Army.
The two worlds started fusing. Andy Warhol, who was kind of a god of the time, said that pop art is taking the inside and putting it outside, and taking the outside and putting it inside, which I think you could certainly apply to Basquiat and Haring and, of course, Richard Hambleton.
So now he's taken the same images that he would put on the street, and he would make those into paintings.
And that leads into, I think, a studio practice that for at least a decade was one of the most interesting, enthralling, ecstatic bodies of work coming out of New York at the time.
My paintings may look fast and spontaneous, but there's a lot of planning and premeditation that goes into it. Well, I think my studio painting is evolving quite a lot, much more than the outdoor work.
Richard went from being a mystery to being immediately snapped up. I remember seeing this big spread about him in Life magazine, like in a dentist office. And you just thought, wow, this is crazy.
Life magazine wanted to do a photo spread. I had this sort of planned out. I had the painting like half finished. So the cameraman actually got covered in paint. Instead of throwing the paint at the canvas, I threw it at the camera. I put a bit of plastic over him, but he didn't know what was going on. I set this up before he got there.
I do remember that when I met Richard, he was kind of a famous artist because his work was omnipresent, so he was really up there in a big way.
In the very beginning, in the late 70s and early 80s, it was not about money.
We used to just drink Valentine Ale all the time and just write stuff on the walls,
There was no ambition in your...
No, there was really no ambition in it at all.
But it quickly became about money.
A lot of the people that collect art right now don't even care what it is. They don't even look at the thing. They're only... It's like an investment. It's like real estate.
These artists who initially started expressing their talent on the street eventually got wider recognition, and then the art market tried to get in on the act.
What's your last name, sweetheart? Basquiat.
You could feel how some of that money of Wall Street was beginning to get into the art market and promoting some of these street artists.
Well, what happened is that it was a time when uptown was coming downtown and downtown was going uptown, and collectors did become interested. And you did start to see limousines start rolling through. People did start spending money on contemporary art. It became an international commodity. It became a symbol of a certain kind of taste to have art.
Well, you would think, to look at this respectable, conservative English Dowager Duchess, that I would not like it. But I love it.
So by this time, you're starting to now get into the money, the big money.
Commodification of art went hand in hand with the bull market on Wall Street. This resulted in less creativity, more branding, and more people getting into art for all the wrong reasons. To buy it and flip it, to become instantly famous. Somebody like Richard, that wasn't part of his reason for making art, and he didn't really participate in that.
When I did the shadows, I wasn't interested in the media at all, because that wasn't worked into the work. I just wanted to focus on painting. Quote by Da Vinci.
So virtually with all this press and every single magazine, you name it, all over the world, you were one of the most celebrated artists in the world.
I was, but I didn't have a gallery, and I was hoping someone would knock on my door.
But they did, and you said no to a
No,
lot of people.
no, I never said no to anybody. I just wasn't home.
The biggest dealers in the 80s wanted Richard. Everybody was trying to get a piece of him. They wanted him. And they thought they could capture him. Nope. He's hard to open up. He's very private.
Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat connected with the Warhol scene. It's not enough to be a great artist. You have to be part of the scene socially. As superficial as that may sound, as icky as that may sound, Richard Hambleton didn't overlap that social scene.
He was not trusting towards a gallery system. He's coming from a place where the art object is a little suspect and the people who sell it are deeply suspect.
I should have taken care of business. I had assistants who were telling me, Richard, why don't you try to take care of business? But I got trapped up in a world of insanity.
Richard, in a way, was his own worst enemy. I think in order to run with that fashionable society, you have to be able to play a certain game, at least be able to feign some clear-headedness. And it's common knowledge that Richard had a problem with drugs.
It was drugs that were making him that way, and he became more trouble than he was worth.
In the midst of becoming the most important thing in New York with Basquiat, with Keith, he leaves.
There was a few years there where we seemed to be constantly traveling. He was showing extensively at that point, so he would use the show as a way to get to the city to also then expand his street work.
In Europe, they looked great because all those little alleyways. This is Venice. You could not go to Western Europe without seeing the shadow. This is Milano.
That's in Milano?
Yeah, that's Milano in the back of the church.
Paris, Rome, all the hot spots. Even goes to the Middle East, eventually winds up in Japan, and stays over a year and a half. He's just an American artist, transient, traveling the world, but he's always doing art.
I was hanging out with some friends in Berlin, and the Checkpoint Charlie Museum heard that I was in town, and they offered me a few $1,000s to do something on the wall, anything I wanted. And they said, if you get arrested by the East German police, there's nothing we can do for you. And I just painted a bunch of shadows on the wall.
This was kind of at the height of his art world popularity. And Richard had the celebrity and access to a fair amount of money, which did fuel his incipient drug habit. But Hambleton is totally a guy that's on his own wavelength. All of a sudden, he just started painting a totally different kind of scene.
He started to work on landscapes using silver leaf and all sorts of gorgeous, gorgeous materials. But the art world didn't want that. The art world in the 80s still wanted Richard's shadow figures. He didn't care what the art world wanted from him. He, as an artist, said, this is where I'm moving, this is what I'm going to do.
Does the artist make more pictures that look the same as the ones that sold for 20 grand? Or does the artist experiment into a new thing that people might not like?
You start with the horizon line. Once you have the horizon line, anything you do becomes a landscape. You can't make a mistake. And there's spontaneity involved here. It's a beautiful painting. It was part of my personal evolution, but also I wanted to do something that was had a different sensibility. And it was romantic. As I said, it's not about landscape, it's about love.
If Richard Hambleton chose to move from the sort of more edgy, more expressionistic work he was doing on the street to something that was more academically beautiful along the lines of Turner, it would be tantamount to career suicide. That's not what people were looking for. For whatever reason, he turned his back on the art world. It just wasn't his thing. I mean, he wasn't a careerist.
People thought it was kitsch. I mean, beautiful was like such a derogatory term. It's like, you're working with beauty? I mean, how... God, we did that for a couple centuries. We're over that now.
You know, I could have made $1 million just selling shadow heads. But I went from, one shadow to a flashy shadow head to a seascape. And, a collector would want something and I wasn't doing it anymore.
Richard at this time starts going even more into the painterly aspects of representation. Specifically the seascapes he started doing. Monumentally huge. They were like all subsuming.
Yeah, I never studied, landscapes or seascapes. I just had this idea. I'm going to paint a large wave painting. First one I did was like 24 feet, and it was beautiful. The wave is coming right at you. It's just like you stand in front of it, and it's just like this wave coming.
You stood in front of one. It was the sublime. It was like what Turner was after. The sublime's not about beauty. It's a little bit about fear, right? It's the awesome face of God that you look at for too long, you'll be blinded. This kind of ferocious but gloriously beautiful power. And I wouldn't separate this from his drug intake. He was really interested in ecstasy at that time. And then, of course, drug addiction shift, and then it became about crack and heroin, but it was still about this kind of loss of self. Before Richard's this really slick guy, eating in nice restaurants, super well dressed, hottest girlfriends in New York. As Richard begins to lose himself, and he really does, it's not that long before he's living on the street. It was like pretty much a free fall. But that's embedded in the art. This insane ego death. This is one of the most narcissistic, ambitious, ego-driven guys out there. And it just washed away in this tidal wave of these seascapes.
The drug revolution affected everybody. And Richard became part of that, and he embraced that, and for some reason, he felt it brought him where he could work best. And strangely enough, it worked.
That is sort of right around when Richard and I lost touch with each other. That's when the drugs became an issue.
This is so tragic, actually, that when I think about it, it drives me nuts.
Drugs and art were inextricably intertwined with the New York art scene of the 80s, especially the East Village or the Lower East Side.
There were whole square blocks that were basically a drug bazaar. There'd be long lines leading to the front door of some burnout apartment in a building where you'd slide like however many bills under the door, and they would slide back glassine envelopes of drugs.
They would lower a bucket on a rope, and you would put your money in the bucket, and then they would like haul it back up and put your drugs in it. There's a small handful of people that are still left over from that era that didn't die. And there's sure a big list of people that did die, eh?
It was really kind of something out of Charles Dickens. Drugs were sort of the least of it. Yeah, the prostitution and the murder and all that stuff was commonplace.
I would say between the crash and the Tompkins Square riots that occurred at the end of the 80s, for the whole East Village art movement, that was it. I mean, it was a very short-lived period, what, 6 years? But yet it was the center of the art world.
The major thing, though, all those factors aside, was AIDS.
The American artist Keith Haring has died as the result of AIDS. He was 31.
When you start going from parties every night to funerals every week, it really changes it. You can't underestimate what it means to a community to lose the best third of its population.
Both Basquiat and Haring, without meaning to sound as cynical as this sounds, they made a very good career move. They died. As soon as you die, it means there's not going to be any more work, and therefore your work soars.
So we move to the dust heads to Basquiat, the 1982 work. Sold at $43,500,000.
One reason why Richard never got the kind of appreciation that Haring or Basquiat got is because he didn't die.
We're all different.
We know a couple other art dealers down in the village, and you know, if we may talk to them once every 3 or 4 months, it's really regrettable. But one of the first questions they'll ask is, "Do you know if Richard's still alive?" That's such a horrible question.
I was in the East Village, and this guy approached me. He asked me if I wanted to buy a little painting. I think he wanted $100 or something for it. I just thought, this is a New York junkie. After looking at him a while, I said, it occurred to me that it was Richard.
We heard stories that he would ride his bicycle through the village and he would give a painting to a restaurant owner and they would buy him dinner because he couldn't afford it.
I had documented a lot of the drugs and things in that part of the Lower East Side, and Richard's part of that, and so I documented some of those places where he was. He'd be in there with his girlfriend, and she'd be covered in blood. I mean, it was a mess.
It was this revolving door of artists and drug addicts. And then eventually I moved in. I describe it as a living crime scene.
And there's maybe, in this room now, there's one or two other people staying there. That makes it difficult to work.
Liz! Listen, honey, you took my dope last night? You took my bag of dope last night?
It's just a Lower East Side scenario.
He was living in his little room with a girlfriend and a prostitute. He doesn't get sleep. He doesn't eat. And he takes massive amounts of drugs, where he would make Basquiat look like a Boy Scout.
Whenever Richard did, in his mind, a decent sale, he would go to, I think it was Ross and Daughters, and he would buy caviar. And I always thought that was really funny, because he'd come into the junkie house on Orchard Street with blood everywhere, and, you know, I'd be sitting there on the table shooting up my leg, and Richard would walk in with, like, caviar and, like, a couple bundles of dope. I mean, it was just so surreal.
How did Richard go from this high-flying career that anybody in their right mind would have wanted to protect? 4-star hotels, beautiful women on his arm, tons of money, and then becoming a complete and utter junkie. I don't think it's something that can be articulated, but if one would say anything, one would say that Richard had to follow his muse. And Richard's muse is a cracked-out junkie hoe.
No matter what his circumstance, Richard was always painting. I had never really seen somebody who was so deep in their addiction being able to create in that way with that intensity. I was working the streets at the time, and it was a rough time for me, and we became really close. It was fascinating and exciting and tragic all at the same time. And I always felt that Richard's painting was what kept him sane. And he would use everything. If he didn't have paint, he would use blood.
It's just blood on paper.
Really? So what are they about?
Life and death.
When you boot your heroin, when you first pull it in and the blood starts coming into the syringe, you have this sort of beautiful string landscape, which is made by the blood as it gets pulled into the hypodermic. So then the question becomes, are those beautiful paintings, the one with the gold and the blood, are those really the landscapes of the inside the hypodermic needle? And that's his vision, that's his life, that's his aesthetic, that's what he's drenched in.
You get bashed in the nose.
Oh, somebody was trying to mug you. Somebody thought you bought a bundle.
You know, I trusted the wrong people. And next thing I know, the marshal comes and I get locked out of my studio. So I'm in the street again with nothing.
Living at the gas station was a real low point.
That gas station was just so bizarre. Why would someone want to even go in there, let alone live there? I didn't want to go in there and see if he was home. Yeah.
I don't know how he was able to stay in that space and sleep in that space with the rats running around openly.
Because it was an old garage, there was much more space for Richard to work. And he was creating some of the most amazing things.
In this completely chaotic, unheated gas station, he was making beautiful paintings now. So there at the, one of the bleakest periods in his life, where did he go? He went into beauty.
But property's worth money, so as time went on, the people that owned it realized they had to get him out.
Once again, I was thrown out in the street. And just like that, I didn't have time to prepare to do anything. Situations like that happened all the time.
Richard was selling artwork to us, and we just started collecting to a tremendous extent.
We knew that he lived in his storage room, and we were crawling around one of these storage rooms one time, and he handed me this Tupperware container, and I said, "What's this?" And he said, "That's my urine from the other night." Okay.
He needed a place to live and work, and we did rent out a place, but it was impossible. We gave him thousands in a week. I mean, couldn't you live on $4,000 or $5,000 cash a week? I could. There was no reason for this.
Whatever money he earned, he spent, whether it be on women or drugs or art supplies.
It'd be endless to iterate all the fuck-ups Richard's done. But they're not entirely all his fault. He had some bad luck with some dealers. When he got ripped off, he decided he didn't want to show.
People would take advantage of him left and right. I mean, especially when he was kind of coming out of that connection to the art world. People knew that Richard was desperate. People knew that he wasn't being represented anymore.
There is some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of Richard getting in bed with the wrong people.
He was, I believe, near death when I first met him. He was by himself. He was just sort of a side note at that time, selling his art for nothing to anyone who would buy it. And I really felt bad for him, so I picked him up. I became his friend, his mentor, and Richard continued to come to my studio space from 1992 to 2001 after the World Trade Center collapsed. And he came to my space 3 to 5 days a week and worked continuously. I would commission him to do each piece, so I would have a contract for every single piece. So Richard would come in, he wouldn't get the money until he finished the piece. It was a very controlled situation.
I think Richard found himself at times in desperate need of money. And unfortunately, when certain people became aware of that, he was grossly taken advantage of.
He had a huge art collection, so he was always behind on his rent at his storage space. So I would help him with the storage space bills, and I ended up with 7 Keith Haring subway chalk drawings, 4 or 5 John Michel's works, and the amount of work that I had, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, the largest collector in the world of Richard's paintings. When the economy tanked in 2008, I was forced to sell off a large portion of his collection. Bruce Willis and Mick Jagger and everybody else owns his work now. It all came from my studio.
He lent Richard space to maybe make work with the understanding that if these pieces were to be sold in the future, the monies would be split. That ended up completely backfiring.
We were like brothers, and I had told him at the time that, if it was to be resold, then we would maybe be able to work something out, which never came to be, with the way the economy tanked and me losing contact with Richard and that whole thing. But he signed a contract for every piece, so I own the artwork.
People did more or less steal from him, or certainly did not live up to their end of the bargain, and that's very sad. The net result is he's become not really bitter, but there's a distrust there.
After I lost contact with Richard in about 2004, the Woodwards picked up Richard, and they helped him along for a number of years.
One day I asked myself, who's left? Like, who's still around from my world of the 80s? I come from the 80s. God, Richard Hambleton. Where the hell is he? And then I started to call Richard and call him and leave messages and call him. I called him 44 times.
Hi, I'm glad you called, but I leave a message and I'll call you back later.
Richard was in a very crammed storage closet in a basement of the building. And it was very dark. And there he was. It was like something out of a movie. The light was at his back, so when you came in, you could only see him as a shadow. And I'm standing there looking at this going, is this a movie? Or is this reality? You see the work, you're drawn to it. It's almost like you're seduced, right? You want to naturally help this guy. Richard's art is doing its magic.
Let them talk if they want to.
Richard Hambleton, let's tell people where they can see this artwork. Where's the gallery, the John Woodward Gallery located?
133 Eldridge Street.
And it'll be there for another...
We're there for just one more week. It ends this week. So we hope everybody can come down and check it out. It's quite a remarkable show.
Right. Richard, what's next for you? Richard Hambleton, the great artist who's... We're so happy to have with us. It's a great honor to have here and let them talk.
Just going to continue.
Yeah, Vlad, come look at this. He's got all these fucking, like, all these bikes and shit. I don't know what he's trying to do. And then this wall, he built it because he thought he was going to do an art show.
The art show inside.
Yeah, a group show. So he built all these walls.
The best thing I could say that happened for Richard was when we introduced him to Vlad and Andy. We went down to Richard's studio, and it was love at first sight.
I met him with those Basquiats.
When Andy walked in, he just got it. He just looked at it. He said, man, it's amazing. This is the most beautiful, undiscovered artist.
When I first met him, I go, Nemo, he's going to be dead in a week. He's like, yeah. That's what everyone's been saying for 20 years. You good? Hey, you look well.
Yeah, but you can't see it.
Is it getting worse?
Half my nose is gone.
It's like falling off, right?
It's not falling. It's gone. It's completely gone.
So what did the doctor say?
Well, when it was festering, with ooze, they put on a mask and their gloves. They were kind of horrified.
Richard has cancer, severe scoliosis, and he's not going to go in and have surgery. He's afraid. He just copes with that physical deformity. It doesn't seem to impede his work.
You're energetic today.
Most people would be afraid of Richard when they see him for the first time. But Andy and I had the idea to put on a show for him. Instead of just putting on a show for young artists, we had the opportunity to revive someone. We were able to revive the ghost.
And I was so fascinated, I dropped every other project I was working on and made it my business to find where his inventory was, who was involved with him, his history. And I'm just like, hold on, this is too good to be true.
Andy and Vlad immediately recognized Richard's work as something very important and untapped. Okay. It was there for the taking.
We said, look, we'll do New York, 2009, September Fashion Week, Richard's first show.
We both knew that Mr. Armani would be someone that would really enjoy the black and white style of the works, and we knew that Mr. Armani was someone that had actually a good knowledge of the 80s and the 80s art scene. We called him up and they just decided to sponsor the first show in New York.
I didn't want to be known as an art dealer. I didn't want to be associated with being a gallery. I just wanted to do projects in a way that I really believed in. And Richard was one project that I set out to go, this has to be told.
Yeah.
Oh, this could be this.
It's definitely part of you.
CNN, yeah. This is CNN. Hello?
Hi, Richard. Hi, nice to see you. Well, I wanted to start, Richard, with some of the paintings that you are first well known for, which you call your public art.
Yeah.
And this is this murder series, a mass murder. Now, did somebody actually get killed there or no?
Someone's inside there.
Somebody's inside there? What do you mean?
Chopped up.
Chopped up?
Yeah.
Actually?
No.
Okay.
I spent 12 months on the phone all day, every day, traveling the world, finding every Richard Hambleton I could.
He calls us every 3-4 months. Oh, don't you want to sell? He's offered us nearly $200,000 for that.
He found people in New York, but also people in Jersey and people in Colorado and people in Florida that had collected Richard's works in the 80s and the 90s.
I met Vlad and Andy, and I showed them art and sold, the large body of paintings to them.
We were lucky enough to come across some vast collections of other people's works, but 90% of our energy went in to visiting Richard to make sure he was painting. Richard! 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 Hey, Richard. Well, when you commit to Giorgio Armani himself, you expect the artist to give you a few paintings, no?
One way or another, I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna get you one way or another. I'm gonna win ya. I'm gonna get you.
Richard, I've been here 30 minutes. It's fucking cold, dude. Well, we've been trying to get some work out of him for 2 months. Richard? Hey, man. How you doing? Good. You good?
No, I'm not good.
I actually had not heard from Richard in ages and got a phone call out of the blue if I would come over and help with these two guys.
I'm doing a series of rodeos.
Who were coming to his studio to look at work.
I finally got the position of this guy
And I said yes, happily. And that's when I first met Andy and Vladimir.
She really cared about Richard. It seemed like a really tender relationship that they had. They really loved and respected each other. If he had problems, she would try to help.
You should come back on Sunday.
Sunday's our day.
That's a good day.
Yeah, we always come back and say the same thing every Sunday.
There was always pressure with time and people worrying about, is it going to be done? And it's been a part of the relationships he's had with galleries from the beginning. He would make an appointment for someone to come to the studio, and at the time, there would be something to show. And then he gets back in there and has to repaint the thing because he's made one adjustment, which then requires yet another adjustment over here, and then nothing ever really gets finished.
To me, this is virtually done.
This needs to be changed just a bit.
This is too much now, come on.
Don't worry. Yeah. No,
there's no show, there's no art.
No, don't worry. I am dying to finish these.
If you're dying to finish them, finish them.
I mean, part of me understands to try to work with that kind of pressure is very, very difficult. And this every other day thing is really getting crazy.
You want $2,500 a week? Finish paintings, man. I'm into my 4th Sunday.
Okay, all I'm saying...
For the same one still set up.
That's insane.
At a certain point, it's not that difficult to discern, okay, when Richard says 2 weeks, this is a flexible number. It shouldn't be, but it is. And that did start to create a lot of mistrust and anger.
I'm not leaving you without something tonight, because I gave you the money, and that's always the deal.
That's not the deal. You're taking any art right now.
No,
excuse me. For certain part, no, I can't do it. I'm messing this up.
No,
don't. Let's leave you alone, Richard. Let's leave. He's going to fuck it up.
It would become very frustrating being called in to help and see the opportunity that was being presented, yet Richard just repainting these paintings.
Thank you for coming over.
God.
I think those guys like my...
Yeah, they did.
It's fucking insane.
All right.
Okay.
Richard would talk about the art world, and there was a lot of complaining. Of course, at the time, I would think, yeah, those motherfuckers. Yeah, Richard, that's terrible. How dare they treat you like that? But after I got clean, many years looking back and still dealing with Richard, I thought, well, I don't really know, where the truth lies. I mean, Richard did a lot of fucked up things, Addicts in general become very difficult to even talk to, let alone work with. So I don't know.
According to Richard, everyone takes advantage of him. Nobody's ever done right by Richard, according to Richard. And he slanders all of them to me, and I'm sure he slanders me to them.
When you least expect it, and you have some sort of agreement with this guy, something completely different will happen. And you feel betrayed. Regardless of who you are in the world and how much you give this guy, he's going to get you. He's going to upset you. He's going to make you so angry that you swear to God you will never speak to him again.
Richard! Hey, Richard. Good on you. Don't be surprised. Dude, you understand. When you do a $500 million art show, you need art.
I can't seem to have focus, like maintain a focus for longer than a few seconds. We had everyone saying, Richard, this is your art show of your career, you have to make art. We could not get him to make a painting, and every great painting that we saw when we come to collect it, he would then throw paint and destroy it. And it was just like, Richard, what are you doing? Don't push me so much, it's insane.
No, I'm pushing you.
No, I want to do it. I want done. Let's talk about something else, okay?
And the people writing a check with $500,000 to do your show want to see something for it, and they're not getting shit. And so therefore they can tell you about yourself.
They're getting 30 years of my life, too.
Often there will be a painting, but he's not ready to let it be seen, and he will repaint and repaint and repaint.
No, it's not.
You painted over it. Oh my God, you painted over it.
I'm telling you that, you're accusing me of something that's not true.
You ruined it again.
It wasn't finished at all.
Hey, Richard, I swear to God, man, you're scaring me.
It wasn't finished at all.
If I don't show the people in Europe that something's on the way, they're not going to give us a check for you, and they're going to go to the next project. Because you're not the only thing in the world, Richard.
I don't think I am, but honestly,
you're acting like that.
No, I'm not. I'm tired
You're
of it.
acting like you two, like, who are you, dude? It's like, you want to be on the street and broke? Because they're asking me every day, where's the stuff from Richard's studio? And I'm never bringing it. And I look like a fucking idiot every time I leave the studio. And
I feel like a fucking idiot when you come here, too. I feel worse than you do. I do. I feel worse than you do. And you keep making
It's not a contest who feels worse.
No, I feel worse. And I look worse.
It doesn't matter.
I don't eat. I'm not eating. I'm not sleeping.
Really, at the end of the day, it did have to do with not wanting to release a painting until he felt it was ready to leave the studio. And his idea of when something is finished and everybody else's often did not mesh.
I can't give it to you right now.
We've got nothing to show. Bosses want to know.
Honey, I don't want to fight with you. I'm really tired, okay? Please.
You're painting over everything that's finished, Richard. All you do is paint over it.
That wasn't finished, Andy.
This is not normal. I'm scared.
We'll be ahead of time by the end of this week. Believe me, we'll be ahead of time. This work isn't, it's conceptual. My brain is going to fall apart if I don't get it out.
Oh, Richard. Oh, finally, mate.
So glad to see you.
So glad to see us?
Yeah. Glad to see you.
Hey, Richard, this one's incredible. This is done.
Almost finished. This one is finished.
This is a good one, huh? Incredible.
Yeah, nice pose. Yeah, really happy with this one.
And these are going to be amazing.
Oh yeah, see, you can't see it, but there's a...
But yes, now the hard part's done. Now you just got to finish it off, right? Hey Richard, we finally got here.
Yeah.
6 weeks later.
I know.
It's good though, right?
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Everything good takes time. I know I'm annoying, but watch the result we get. Do you understand?
Yeah, we're going to work together.
Oh, this is sick.
This is a good one.
On the first show we did in 2009, we had people begging, fighting over paintings. Sold 24 paintings, 4,000 people throughout the night. It was such a success.
Did it have a major effect on Richard's career? You bet. Pushed him through the roof.
Everyone from Mary J. Blige, Russell Simmons, Alicia Keys, to every sort of actor, actress, musician, hedge fund, politicians. Yeah, we sold paintings for 400,000 for Richard.
Obviously working with the Armani team brought something else. When they actually put together their PR machine, they're very, very strong, and all these elements mixed together just brought the most exciting crowd I had ever seen at an art show before.
Were you surprised at the reaction that everyone had and the press and like what the world's sort of how they covered that show?
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was huge.
They were very successful with him, and they put his prices into another range because they had the clientele and they had the worldwide reach.
It was like a dream. So I was like, wow, you know, it's finally getting somewhere.
AMFAR is the American Foundation for AIDS Research, and it's the biggest dinner of the week in Cannes during the festival. Every year they choose one artist, and Richard was picked in 2010.
I had no idea what to expect, you know, how well it would do.
It's your bid, sir.
And I started, and the bids started coming from everywhere.
Warmest congratulations, all done. Sold! Well done! At 400,000 euros.
The room went crazy. And then they came up to us and asked us if we wanted to donate a second one because they were raising so much money, and we gave them another piece.
They were auctioning other artists that night, and they were going for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. 2 Richard Hambletons went for basically $1 million.
The high point for me, anyway, was the Phillips exhibit.
There were over 5,000 people, you know, front cover International Herald Tribune, New York Times features on the show.
With Vlad and Andy, you had an amazing mix of gorgeous women and people from showbiz, from the fashion world, the fun mix of people.
He turned up at the very end. I've never seen a reaction like a superstar walked in the room. I've been to many art shows. I've never seen a reaction of people when they encounter Richard Hambleton walking in.
I believe that Andy and Vlad were very happy with the outcome of the exhibition. They are both very good salespeople, and I think that they sold, you know, a fair amount of works.
Andy and Vladimir did reintroduce him. All of a sudden, he was again in the world in a way, and people began to reconsider his work, which is all good. But there was a sadness about it. Andy and Vladimir tend to travel in very glamorous circles, and all these sort of models and this glamorous crowd, and here is Richard. It made him feel very good that he's back in some sort of spotlight, but at the same time difficult. I mean, it just sort of accentuated this distance between where he is and where the pieces are going. He's been at these points before. Never really seeing that the work gave him access to maybe this or that it could be a vehicle for something else. The buck kind of just stopped there. At the end of the day, it really was just about the work.
So many people offered to help him. Major promoters. But he's very difficult. He doesn't like to give his best things.
I brought a rich guy there one time to buy artwork. And the guy says, oh, yeah, I love that work right there. I want that work. Richard, no, that one's not for sale. I said, Richard, come on. This guy's got money right now. He's going to leave town. What are you doing? No. I don't want to sell that one.
All his works, his major works, he did not want to sell. He would get rid of the things that were minor to him. But the major works, no.
And the more money that was going into those shows and the more famous Richard was becoming again, the harder it became for us to actually get works from him.
Over the 3 years that I've worked with him, and from his friends like Meta and stuff, witnessing what I've actually given him, I think he was making $1 million a year out of his studio, cash, blowing every single cent of it. Every time we go in, I need another 5,000, another 10,000. Telling you every day he's broke.
I was a little bit afraid of Richard. I mean, I had some moments with him in the studio where, Andy and I actually ran away a couple times because he was too crazy.
Then all the drug dealers would turn up, some bad ones. And they'd be like, I heard you got some money for Richard. And I was just like, no, I don't. And when there was confrontation, it got really bad sometimes.
We had good moments, but towards the end, it just became too difficult.
The lies and the lies and the lies. I was just burnt out. And I just knew that was the end. He knew it was the end. And since then, yeah, I've had very little contact with him.
What seems like a mistake to the people around Richard who want him to be a great known painter and want him to sell work because they also want to make money and want him to participate, in the art world, to be perhaps in his last months or years an esteemed painter. Maybe that doesn't fit in with Richard's idea for himself.
He had the studio in Orchard, and he fell behind in his rent, and the notices were put on the door, but Richard wasn't paying attention to any of that, and he was evicted.
See, it wasn't a legal eviction. I mean, I never got it. I noticed. I just lost so much shit. I just couldn't believe they'd actually thrown my paintings out.
He was a homeless man at this point, and so we had told him not to worry. We would make arrangements for him to stay in a hotel, and that started a cycle that lasted many, many months.
I think that this tension has made my cancer speed up. My face is really rotting away.
Is he riding on borrowed time? I don't know. I could say the same thing 3 years ago. He just keeps going.
By some luck, a very lovely man walked into the gallery.
I said, listen, I'm from Moscow, and I heard of Richard Hambleton. And she told me Richard's story of his life, art, his paintings, and everything. And all of a sudden, I became so interested. At a certain stage, she said, we take care of him, and he has no place to live. And I said, look, I might have a solution.
Do you have something ready? Let's ask that question. It's a good question. You're not sure if you have something ready? I told Michael that we were getting the painting today at 2 o'clock. He's been so gracious to keep the accommodations available for you, and I'm embarrassed. I know that your paintings sell for a lot of money, but you know that the trump for a month is like $20,000 to $40,000. Can we have it before 6?
Yeah. If I can get into the trunk, then it'd be nice.
And that's all I want for you.
Right.
I want you to be able to relax.
What am I doing? Whoops. Oh, God. So,
Oh, yeah. Triple.
I like the red. Wow.
Yeah, it's popping.
Good job. Good job.
Good job, Richard.
At least Basquiat, died. I was alive when I died, It's a problem.
Can I get a taxi, sir?
If you look at Richard as having burned all these bridges, in the end, you could say he hasn't burned any bridges because he continues to do what it was he's always been doing. He's been totally committed to art and art only. And he's also somebody you can kick in the face and will get right back up, which is pretty heroic.
With Richard, it was always about the work. He just constantly was painting and letting that represent him.
It's not going to be any kind of simple math and you're going to get like an even number at the end. We don't understand Caravaggio. We don't understand Van Gogh. We just don't understand them.
Van Gogh would go deeper, and that's the same thing that you feel with Richard. He's on the edge of a precipice, and he might not make it.
Richard is one of the very few artists who has not allowed the market to creep into his work. He's dirty and rocky and shabby and elegant and doesn't make any sense. He colored outside the lines the whole time. Most people at some point would go, I can't do this anymore. But Richard is on the hero's journey, and he's riding that black steed all the way. He's just holding on to the hair, and it's just him and that, and there's nothing else.